the amount of his lies, it's been pretty well documented, whether you support him or not,
Hmm?
sort of beyond anything we've ever seen. Does that concern you? How do you kind of, in your own mind, I guess, rationalize your support for him with the fact that
It's not that I rationalize. I think that the same is true of Hillary. And if you go and look at the list of her lies and things that came out of her mouth that have been proven untrue, for me, quite honestly, with who the choices were last year, at the time, I felt I was going with the lesser of two evils. And looking back, I couldn't be happier with the choice I made.
I have unbelievably high admiration for Hillary Clinton. I think that to compare how she frames issues to how President Trump, President Trump frames issues is night and day. Hillary listens to experts. She has her staff people fight with each other on issues that she can take both sides or sometimes four sides on an issue. I have no doubt that there are untruths that may be said by anyone running for office that you can catch them on. But you can't compare it to the well-documented over 14,000 lies. And when I started, I said, I'm not sure he can tell the truth. I'm not sure he can tell. He says a lie and his echo chamber repeats the lie and repeats the lie. And what we Jews have learned from Goebbels was you repeat a lie enough, you believe it, and everybody who listens to you believes it.
Ruth, I do, and I know some of this is a little bit old history, but this idea that Hillary, told a lot of lies. Can you be a little more specific about that? Where you got your information, what specifically you're talking about?
Yeah, so I actually, and I don't think there's a way for me to with you guys, but I found this in the New York Times, and it was sort of like a chart that gave a lot of different politicians or political figures truth meters.
So it sounds like you looked at that one document, that one chart, and other things. What other things? Other people in your community?
I read things all the time, and I do read everything from New York Times to Breitbart to I think I mentioned to you during our first interview that I believe Google not only listens to you, but listens to your thoughts, and Facebook. Mm-hmm. And they literally throw things your way to match your thoughts. And when I have a Facebook break,
they do indeed, and
they do indeed.
Part of the issue.
When they throw things, when I'm scrolling Facebook, when I'm looking, a lot of things come up, and I'll click and I'll read. I try very hard not to just read the headlines, because sometimes they're just such misleading words. But I do read, and I don't necessarily look at what the source is, because I know that Facebook would limit me strictly to very conservative news sources if I let it. So I have a friend here, I don't know if Hannah knows him, who is very, very, very left-wing. And he publishes things anti-Trump, anti-Republican all the time. Purposely click on it to read it in order to get his view of things. So it's not really where the source is coming from for me. It's the information is out there. It's excessive. It's overwhelming. I try to take in as much as I can and form my opinions.
There's still the issue of, and you say it's not rationalizing, but I guess reconciling the Jewish values around falsehood and lying and truth and honesty. I think it's emetz, and I'm not, my Hebrew is not very good, but I'm sure you both know what I'm talking about. What are they called? Emet and sheker.
Sheker?
Yes. How you reconcile those values. And I know you're from Israel and you're Jewish, and, with, you know, a politician like Trump, like which you say in your own words, he can be pretty dishonest, to put it mildly. Thank you. So yeah, tell me, I mean, we've talked around this a little bit, but how do you reconcile that?
I very simply look at his actions. I don't think I pay as much attention to what comes out of his mouth, or quite honestly, any politician's mouth, as I do to their actions. And what I do know is that there are things being done to curb terrorist acts in Israel itself. There is an embassy that is now in Jerusalem. The Golan Heights is, as it always should have been, a recognized part of Israel. Here in the US, there is tremendous cuts to welfare programs that will force people to go and work. There are things happening that I feel should have always happened. And to me, what he's doing is just, that's how I reconcile it. It's so much more important than what he says or how he says it. I would like him to work on not just being more honest, but just being more kind and being more of a role model, because he is a person who is the most watched, I think, in the world, right? More eyes on him than anybody else. And I think that when kids are watching you and you're calling other people by names, it's not a lesson that should be taught. I don't think it's okay. It's not what he wants for his grandkids.
Yeah, Hannah, how do you respond?
Well, you said you don't want to spoon feed partisan politics to your kids, but I assume you do want to spoon feed Jewish values. And the Jewish values that include being honest, being respectful, being caring, being empathetic, are fundamental Jewish values. And they, I believe, are absent from President Trump. The lack of empathy, 700,000 people are going to be kicked off in January off of food stamps. You're a foster mother. You know how important that is to the health and well-being of children. How on earth is that anywhere a Jewish value? Never mind his dishonesty and his dismissal of all criticism as fake news or a hoax. It's somebody, he is somebody who believes in absolute power, who believes that the Constitution, which I do not believe he's ever read, that the Constitution allows him to do anything he wants. This is not what American democracy is, and it is not in alignment with Jewish values.
So I do spoon feed my children. Not necessarily, well, okay, so they're Jewish values, but I present them to my children as human values. I think that empathy and care and respect and all of that are human values. And when anyone, whether it's a kid at school or President Trump, acts in a way that does not meet those values, my statement to my kids is, you still act the right way. You still are, how people act has nothing to do with you. And I teach that to my children and to my foster child, who has a lot of victim mentality, a lot of entitlement mentality, and will literally excuse her behavior with, so-and-so talked to me this way, or so-and-so said this to me. And I say repeatedly, what people say and do has nothing to do with you. You choose who you want to be. You choose how you want to act. And that's the bottom line. So whether it's the president or anyone else, I explain to my kids, humans make mistakes and humans act wrong. And humans are not perfect. Your job is not to be perfect. Your job is to be better today than you were yesterday and better tomorrow than you are today. And my kids hear that endlessly.
I believe that words do matter. I believe words matter when our children speak disrespectfully. I believe when anyone gets our sacred votes and they are disrespectful. I believe words matter. So I can't say to someone with any integrity, Don't listen to the words. They're not important. Look at their deeds, because a whole lot of the deeds are the words.
So I think you might have misheard me. I didn't say that the words don't matter. What I said was that people's words do not impact how we choose to talk and act. So it was more of a role modeling type of thing. So I'm not saying to my kids, their words don't matter. I'm saying their words matter a lot. And if they hurt you, don't use them back, because you're not doing anything good. So I fully agree with you. Words do matter. I just don't think that that other people's words and actions should control our choices.
I'm with you on that, but it
Okay.
does matter what the leader of the free world
Yeah, and I might have
says.
misexplained myself the first time.
So Ruth, do you want to respond on the issue of the food stamp?
I do. I hope it's the first of many.
Mhm. And why?
Because I see the system firsthand on a daily basis. I see people collecting food stamps while wearing $100 slippers that I won't allow myself. I see people trying to sell their food stamps, including to me, on a regular basis. I see people collecting food stamps and smoking cigarettes. I see people coming to pick up their checks and they're surrounded in a puff of marijuana smoke. I am fully for marijuana and I hope it becomes legal. Let's just be clear on that. I just don't feel that I should fund their lifestyle and their habits. If you have money for cigarettes, marijuana, alcohol, feed your own kids. It has nothing to do with me. And I think that we need to help and protect and we need to feed other people has only fed into a give me mentality. And if you wanted, I could send you screenshots of conversations with my employees that will blow your mind. Like, can you pick up a shift today? Answer, what's my incentive? You can go on my Facebook. I posted it. I erased a person's name just out of respect. But the answer was, what's my incentive? And my reply to her was, I would think that feeding and housing your own children should be enough incentive.
So just to clarify, Ruth, by your employees, who are you talking about?
I employ about 50 people.
And these are through your group homes that you run? And those group homes, so the people you're employing, they're not people who live in these group homes?
They do not live in the group homes, no. So there are people who are disabled or mentally ill or have dementia who live in the group homes, and I employ caregivers 24/7 around the clock at multiple locations to provide care to the individuals. Everything from cleaning to bathing to feeding to doing medications, you name it, they're the caregivers. And a lot of caregivers are single moms, inner city type individuals, and the give me mentality and the other people should do for me while I sit around mentality, I'm sorry, I see it on a daily basis. All the food
I've never seen it. And my daughter's also a foster mom. And that food that she buys and that everybody else in line who is at the grocery store buys include food for the babies, food for the children. And if you know some bad apples, I don't know why you would hire them.
I know 16 years of bad apples, and this is healthcare. So our turnover is significant because it is healthcare.
Well, you know that President Ronald Reagan, kind of invented the welfare queen driving up in her Cadillac to get her welfare benefits. That story has been debunked for decades. You have firsthand knowledge of bad apples, that's reprehensible, that's fraud. But for the 700,000 that are going to be cut off, I assure you, this means children will starve, children will not get the nutrition they need. That's what the food stamp program's about.
So I invite you, I mean, you're only a couple hours away. I invite you to come to work with me and see the insanity revolving around food stamps, and not just food stamps. The amount of fraud in free childcare, the amount of just fraud in the system. There are 50 some entitlement programs in the state of Wisconsin, and when you sign up for one, you get the rest. And the amount of abuse that goes on will truly blow your mind.
Ruth, aside from your own experience, I mean, it is true. I mean, everything I've read that the whole idea of, welfare fraud, SNAP fraud, whatever is has been way exaggerated. I mean, there's no evidence that I've seen personally, but I'd be interested if you have seen evidence beyond your own experience.
I've had people offer me their food stamps for money, 50 cents on the dollar.
A lot of people?
A
Really?
significant number of people over 16 years.
You haven't reported them?
I've tried,
Yeah.
and it's impossible to get through the system. You don't know where to report them. I'll get comments like, oh, I'll let their case manager know. And eventually, I mean, I already work 12, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. When do I have the time for it?
Yeah.
The amount of unemployment fraud, I've had people say to me, Ruth, I can't work full time. I have $10,000 in my unemployment account that I need to collect. It took me years to find out that I, as an employer, in order to combat that, have to track and document every work hour offered to them and then go report it so that then it counts as work they could have done but chose not to do.
Mm-hmm.
We have people who come in and do an interview and we never hear from them again. They're reporting to unemployment that they're job seeking. So they're getting their checks. It's ludicrous what goes on in the system on a daily basis. People just don't show up to work and then harass us for letters saying that they no longer work for us so that they can collect more benefits and more assistance.
Then you really should not hire them.
They're all doing it. Not hire who? They're literally the entire pool of applicants.
Why do you think they're doing it?
Because the system allows it.
Do you think it could have anything to do with the fact that they're having a hard time making enough money to make ends meet?
If they choose to not come to work, they're not making not enough money. If you choose to not, when I call you and I say you're on shift today and you say I don't have a way there and I say I'll come pick you up and they say no, on a regular basis, I'm not talking about once in a blue moon. I'm talking about today, this afternoon. Mm-hmm. The employee is being offered a ride to work because she doesn't want to pay $27 for an Uber and the phone is not being answered.
Just as a point of fact,
mm-hmm.
you know that the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level, which regulates this, has an inspector general.
Okay, I think it's the Office of Inspector General. Mm-hmm.
Right, but the IG does the public statements on what, and their goal is to find fraud. And when they do their investigations, the biggest fraud that they find are doctors who misstate on forms what they've done so that they can get a bigger reimbursement, mainly in Medicare. The frauds that they have been able to investigate in women, infant, children, WIC programs and food stamps barely make a percent. Barely make a percent. It's really too bad. They all seem to work for you. But I am telling you,
and every other group home operator,
whose job it is to find fraud, to save taxpayer money, has not found this rampant fraud that you're talking about. And as a point of empathy, if they're taking their food stamps and selling it for cigarettes, shame on them. Shame on them. They ought to be not doing their job. You shouldn't be hiring them. And with the low unemployment rates, it's probably hard to find others. And there's always a handful of people that will take advantage of a system. But have some rahmanas. This is literally taking food out of the mouths of children.
I disagree. I think this is literally going to force people to learn to work and fend for themselves. And we have done nothing but create generation after generation after generation of people who depend on the government to feed them. And we need to stop it. We will not need the OIG or the IG if the system did not allow for so much fraud. If people were told, choose not to work, you choose not to eat. So get off your tush.
Well, I'm all for people working and having the respect that they feel to themselves when they're working. But I really hope that you understand that people who do not have a political axe to grind at all have found negligible numbers of fraud.
So with regards to doctors defrauding paperwork for Medicaid or Medicare reimbursement, absolutely should not be the case. I will tell you, and it is not an excuse, but it's something to be considered, that the The vast majority of doctors do not take Medicaid because the reimbursement rate simply makes it not worth it for them. So how about providing, and granted, I've seen my own insurance bills, the reimbursement rates for doctors are obscene. There's no reason for the charges to look like they look. But if there were to be reasonable reimbursement rates, I think that the need to defraud, there will always be people defrauding because that's just people. But I think that if a doctor by some way is either choosing to take Medicaid or being forced to take Medicaid and had a reasonable reimbursement rate, I'm hoping that that would stop the need to commit fraud.
That would be wonderful.